Hi, fourth graders. Today we are talking about lesson 92, classifying quadrilaterals. The new concept begins in your math book on page 584. Remember that quadrilaterals are any four-sided polygons. So any closed shape that has four sides would be considered a quadrilateral. And today we are going to talk about different types of quadrilaterals. So if you are on page 585, you can see at the top of the page there are different types of quadrilaterals. And then on that page, there are also definitions for these different types. So looking at a parallelogram has two pairs of parallel sides. Remember, parallel lines are lines that will never touch. They go in the same direction without tipping towards each other in any way. Okay, they'll never meet. So two pairs of parallel sides. So looking at figure A, we have a parallel line here, the top and the bottom. And we have a set of parallel lines here with the right and the left. So A is a parallelogram with two sets of parallel sides. B, same thing, the top and the bottom are parallel lines. The right and the left are also parallel lines. So B is a parallelogram. C, top and bottom are parallel, right and left are parallel. So C is also considered a parallelogram. D, top and bottom are parallel, right and left are parallel. So that is also a parallelogram. E, top and bottom are parallel, but if you look at the right and the left, those sides are slanted in towards each other, so they will eventually touch if we extend those sides out. So that is not a parallelogram. So all of these first four shapes can be called a parallelogram. Those are all parallelograms. Okay, moving on to trapezoids. Trapezoid is a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. So any of these ones that we said were parallelograms with two sets of parallel sides cannot be a trapezoid because the trapezoid only has one pair. So if we look at E, we have one pair of parallel sides at the top and the bottom, but that is it. So E is a trapezoid because those second sets will eventually touch. Okay, moving on to rectangle. Now, I think you're pretty familiar with what a rectangle looks like, but the definition of a rectangle would be a parallelogram with four right angles. So if you look at the angles of all of these figures, if they have a right angle, then they are considered a rectangle. Remember, a right angle makes those squares. So is A have right angles? No. Does B have right angles? No. Does C have right angles? Yes. If you look carefully at all four of these corners, we see a right angle. So C is considered a rectangle because it has four right angles. If you look at D, do we have right angles? Yes. 4. So D is also a rectangle. And if you looked at D without any other information, I think that you would have probably called this a rectangle. That's typically what we think of when we think of a rectangle. And then E, do we have right angles? No. So that is not a rectangle. Moving on to the next definition, a rhombus is a special type of parallelogram. So parallelogram has two sets of parallel sides whose sides are equal in length. So a rhombus has all sides, or two sets of parallel sides, and all sides are the same length. So A is a parallelogram, but are all the sides equal in length? No. So it's not a rhombus. B, also a parallelogram. Are all the sides the same length? Yes. So B is a rhombus. C, we have two sets of parallel lines? Yes. Do we have all sides the same length? Yes. It is also a rhombus. And then D, is it a parallelogram with two sets of parallel sides? Yes. Are all sides the same length? No. So that is not a rhombus. And then E, we know is not a parallelogram, so it can no longer be a rhombus either. Okay, looking at the last definition of a square, which I think you're familiar with what a square looks like, but the definition of a square is a regular quadrilateral. So that means that all sides are the same length and all angles are right angles. The angles are the same, the sides are the same. So is A square? No, it doesn't have right angles and the sides are not the same length. Is B a square? No, because the angles are not right angles. The sides are the same length, but the angles are not right angles. C, do we have all sides the same length? Yes. Are the angles right angles? Yes. So C is a square, which I think you would have picked out without any discussion. D, is it a square? No, because we don't have equal length and sides. E, is it a square? No, the sides are not equal in length. We do not have right angles. Okay, so those are what each of the definitions match up with as an image. Moving on to example 1, which of these quadrilaterals is not a parallelogram? Remember, parallelograms have two sets of parallel sides. So, looking at them, does this first figure have two sets of parallel sides? Parallel, parallel, and parallel to parallel. So this one is a parallelogram. Parallel, top and bottom, right and left. Okay, so that does not work. Go to this one. Do we have two sets of parallel sides here? No. We have one set, and then the top and the bottom will eventually touch. So this one is not a parallelogram. It would be a trapezoid. The last figure, just to cover our bases, we have a top and bottom that are parallel, and the right and the left are also parallel. Moving on to example 2. Draw two parallel lines of different lengths, then form a quadrilateral by drawing two line segments that connect the endpoints. So I will draw a shorter line parallel to a longer line, and then I will connect the ends of those lines so that I can form a quadrilateral. I'll try my best anyways. Okay, I have one set of parallel lines, the top and the bottom, and then I've drawn to connect into a quadrilateral. And what type of quadrilateral did I make? I made a trapezoid. It has one set of parallel lines. Okay, if you turn the page in your math books to page 586, example 3, which of the following quadrilaterals has sides that are not parallel or perpendicular? Okay, so looking for parallel or perpendicular lines. Well, in A, the top and the bottom are parallel, the right and the left are parallel. We also have perpendicular sides because they form a right angle right here. So this does not work. It's parallel and perpendicular. B, not parallel, not perpendicular. Well, here we have the top and the bottom that are parallel, and the right and the left are parallel. So this one does not work. We don't have perpendicular sides, but we do have parallel. C, okay, looking for parallel lines. Well, these look close, but if I extend it out, eventually they will touch. And the top and the bottom also are not parallel. Okay, so that works. Are they perpendicular? Do you see any right angles? No. So this one should be our answer. Let's just make sure that this last one has parallel lines, and it does in the top and the bottom, or perpendicular lines, which it does right here with the right angles that are formed. So the only one that works was C, with not parallel or perpendicular. Example 4, describe the angles in each of these quadrilaterals in example 3. Okay, so here we have a right angle and a right angle, which we would mark with those squares. Okay, so all of the angles in A are right angles. B, we would have an acute angle. Here we would have an obtuse angle because it is larger than a right angle. Again, acute and obtuse. If I'm looking over at C, obtuse, obtuse, acute, and acute. And then D, well, here we have a right angle and a right angle. And here we have obtuse, and here we have acute. Moving on to lesson practice. At the bottom of page 587, describe each quadrilateral as a trapezoid, parallelogram, rhombus, rectangle, or square. Okay, so A Is it a trapezoid? So a trapezoid would have only one set of parallel sides. Does this only have one set of parallel sides? Here's parallel, here's parallel. So it has two, so it's not a trapezoid, but instead it would be a parallelogram. Okay, is it a rhombus? Which, if we look back at the definition of a rhombus, that is something that has a parallelogram that has sides equal in length. So it is a parallelogram. Are the sides all equal in length? Yes, it looks like they are. So we would call this a rhombus. Okay, is it a rectangle that has 4 right angles? I would say that this does have 4 right angles, so then it is considered a rectangle. And is it a square that's a regular quadrilateral that has the sides the same length and 4 right angles? And I would say that yes, it has both of those, so it is considered a square. Okay, looking at B. Is B a trapezoid with just one set of parallel sides? No, it has the top and the bottom that are both parallel, so then it would be considered a parallelogram. Is it a rhombus with all 4 sides the same? No. Is it a rectangle with 4 right angles? No. Is it a square with both 4 right angles and 4 sides that are equal? No. So the only name that works is parallelogram for this one. C. Is it a trapezoid with only one set of parallel lines? No, it has top and bottom parallel and right and left parallel. So since it's not a trapezoid, it is then a parallelogram. Is it a rhombus with all sides the same length? No. Is it a rectangle with 4 right angles? Yes. Is it a square with all sides the same length and 4 right angles? No. So we can't call it a square. It does not have 4 sides the same length. D. Is it a trapezoid with one set of parallel lines? Yes. So since it is a trapezoid, it cannot be a parallelogram. And since it cannot be a parallelogram, it cannot be a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square. So the only name that works for the letter D is trapezoid. Describe the angles in figures A through D and the relationship of the sides. Well, we kind of already talked about it as we went through the definitions, but A, we have 4 right angles, and we have 2 sets of parallel sides. B, we have an obtuse angle and acute, and then we have 2 sets of parallel sides. C, we have 4 right angles, 2 sets of parallel sides. These, since we have right angles, we would also have perpendicular lines. And D, we have right angles. On this end, we have an obtuse angle here and an acute angle here, and 1 set of parallel sides. Okay, you can go ahead and do your reteaching for lesson 92, and you won't have a new lesson for today's, but you do have reteaching 92, and then you can just check your answers once you're finished. All right, good job.